Picture this, you go up to a chin-up bar, you grab and pull with everything you've got, and nothing happens. I've seen this 100 times. The good news is you're only a few steps away from getting your first chin-up. In this video, I'm gonna explain why chin-ups are so hard and what's really holding you back. And I'm gonna finally give you all the things you need to know to hit that first rep. My name is Andy Vincent. I spent over 25 years helping clients build strength and confidence. I've coached hundreds of people that once thought chin-ups were impossible, and with the right approach, we've made them feel effortless. And you can follow this process to do the same. So why are they so hard? One of the main reasons is it's not as simple as adding 1.25 kilos onto a barbell and then going up in load every couple of weeks. If you think about it, one rep is actually quite far beyond what you can do. So what you're trying to train for is a super maximal feat of strength. Paired with that, the leverage of the movement makes it quite challenging. The arm has to go through an extreme overhead range of motion. Plus your relative strength really matters. So the heavier your frame, the harder it is to pull that frame up. Building up strength to do a pull-up isn't so much about having bigger muscles, it's more about the brain's ability to recruit those muscles. Getting stronger is what we call a neural adaptation. So you don't need to think about building muscle to try and do your first pull-up, but you do want to make sure you're getting stronger at very task-specific movements to build up to that pull-up strength. Now you understand why chin-ups are so difficult, so let's look at some steps you can take to build up to that first rep. First, let's talk about which grip width to take. Some gyms have these multi-grips, so you can choose where your hand placement is going to be. If you have these neutral hand placements where the palms face each other, I'd suggest to start there because it's generally a little bit easier to do so. And the narrower the hand position, also the easier it should be. If you're working on a flat bar, then you can choose an underhand grip, often called the chin-up, or you can select an overhand grip, which is often called a pull-up. When starting out, you'd go for the easiest grip, so ideally a neutral grip, palms facing, that's quite narrow, or about a shoulder width grip, your palms facing you. Then long term, you can progress to an overhand grip and potentially maybe even go wider. So if you're completely new to chin-ups, you want to start out with a scapular retraction. So for this, you hang off the bar, and all you're trying to do is get your shoulder blades to drop down and up and build some strength in the muscles around the shoulders. Softly allow the shoulders to shrug up towards the ears, and then pull the shoulder blades down, trying to keep the arms as straight as possible. And you would do these for reps between 6 up to 12. Other good exercises to start with are holds. You can hold at the bottom, very similar to the scapular retraction, without actually trying to actively move the shoulder blades. Or you can position yourself at the top and hold in that very top position for time. At first, you might start with 5 or 10 seconds and then work up to no more than about a minute. This builds confidence at the bar, increases grip strength overall, and it teaches you how to manage the body control because you'll start to swing on the bar. Once you've mastered the scapular retractions and the holds, I would then try doing the lowering phase only, often called negatives. So for this, you need to set up by getting up to the top. I generally suggest not to jump. If you jump, you'll start to swing lots. The idea is to get yourself set at the top. I would suggest to softly set the shoulder blades down in that position, step off the rail or box nice and slowly, control the swing for a moment, and then start to descend down to a straight arm position. Now negatives will be hardest when the elbow's at around 90 degrees. So try to make sure you don't just plummet through this part of the range of motion. Try and slowly descend all the way down from the top to the bottom. I would suggest between 1 to 5 reps, and each rep should take somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds to lower yourself down. Another great variation to add in at this stage is a banded chin-up. You've got a couple of options about how to set up the band. You can loop the band around the top and then stretch the band down. For obvious reasons, that could be a little bit dangerous because the band could slip off your knee. So if you're doing chin-ups in the squat rack, I do like this variation where you loop the band around the hooks. And obviously you can move the hooks up to make it easier and down to make it harder. And with banded variations, it's also very important that you have options of band. The thicker the band, the easier it's going to be, and then you can gradually work down to a lighter band. If your gym has an assisted chin-up machine, you can also use that instead of the banded variation. And now a word on shoulder blades. As you're building up some strength, you might have heard coaches say to really pull the shoulder blades down. We don't suggest to do that. We want the shoulder blades to really move off the back of the rib cage. So as much as I don't mind clients softly setting the shoulder blades down, try not to be too aggressive pulling those shoulder blades down throughout the movement. Generally speaking, when you're at the top of the motion with the elbows into the side, that's the part where the shoulder blades will be set down. But as those arms reach overhead, the shoulder blades should naturally start to lift up. So once again, just a soft set at the top, and then just allow the shoulder blades to move freely. Also, a word on overreaching. It's really common when people get to the top, they really round their shoulders out at the bar. I often think this comes because the exercise is called a chin up. So people reference pulling their bar over the chin, but to get there, they have to really shrug their shoulders to do so. So I wouldn't necessarily reference taking the chin over the bar. Just think of bringing yourself to the top, get the shoulders set down, elbows into the side, and wherever your head is fine. I'd rather slightly shortened range without that shrugging of the shoulders. So let's talk next steps. As you're building up strength and you've worked through those first exercises, we now need the next logical progressions. I still like holds at this stage. I've mentioned that the hardest part of the movement is roughly about halfway when the elbow's at 90 degrees. So we can directly challenge this part of the range of motion further by putting holds in at that point. Try and hold for 5 up to say 30 seconds with the elbows at 90 degrees. I still like the use of negatives at this stage. If your gym has a weight belt, I suggest to do some loaded negatives. Start with a 2.5 kilo plate and a nice slow lowering phase, and then build up that load as you increase capacity. And this is about the time you need to start actually trying to pull your weight up. You're probably going to struggle to do a full range of motion, but I like doing partial reps where you start towards the top of the movement, maybe starting at around 90 degrees and pull all the way up to the top. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest to do a really slow lowering phase with these. If it's possible, step out of them, rest for a moment, and then repeat the reps. You're just focusing on that pulling portion. I'll go into this in more detail in the programming section, but you will have those negatives in a different workout. So this bit's all about working on that lifting phase. And I'd suggest between 1 to 5 partial reps per set with about a 20-second rest between each rep. Obviously, you can keep working on those banded variations, but by now you should be on a really light band. And next we need to think about when you can get that first rep, how are we gonna progress from here? I wouldn't expect your first rep to look really clean and pretty. So for a few weeks, you're just gonna try and focus on getting the rep looking a little bit tidier. And when you can do one full clean rep, now we need to start thinking about how we can get your second rep. The challenge here is fatigue. If you do one full clean rep and you go to pull again, you're probably very fatigued and you're gonna find it very hard to get that second rep. But I do want you to build some capacity. And this is where scattered sets come in really nicely. All you would do is scatter single reps throughout your workout. So you might do one at the start, go away and do your first leg exercise, and then come back and do an additional single rep. You could do this scattered single approach across all of your workouts and then focus on total weekly accumulated work. Maybe at first you get 1 rep per workout 3 times per week to accumulate 3 total reps. Then you could build that up to 6, 9, 12, and so on. If you're serious about getting stronger, make sure you hit subscribe. We've got more deep dives like this coming. Another great option to build reps is something called clustered sets. So for clusters, you do your 1 full rep, you come down to the floor, you wait 30 seconds, and then you go back in and you try again for 1 full rep. And in this format, you might be able to get, say, 3 reps. 1 rep, rest 30 seconds, another rep, rest 30 seconds, 1 more rep, rest 30 seconds. Generally what happens is the second and third rep, they get a bit ugly, so you want to spend some time making sure each of those single reps gets cleaner and cleaner over the weeks. So now you know the exercises. Next, we need to talk about how do you program these across your week. First, let's discuss training frequency. I suggest to practice the skill of pulling up in at least 2 workouts up to no more than 3 workouts per week. Have 1 exercise per workout so you have a blend of exercise selection across your training. That could be a hold in 1 workout, a band assisted in another, and then the negatives in the 3rd workout. Now this next bit is key. Always start your workout with your chin-ups. Whatever you do first, you're gonna be freshest for and you can put the most focus on. If your training is always 3 days back to back or just end up 1 week being 3 days back to back, maybe consider dropping a pull-up exercise out of that middle workout just to manage fatigue. Because next, a really important thing to understand is managing the fatigue and managing the overall volume that you do. We definitely want a quality over quantity approach when it comes to chin-ups. For example, if you're doing 3 sets of banded pull-ups, each set going quite close to failure for say 8 reps, that's massively fatiguing. If you're then doing a different chin-up variation 2 days later, you might struggle to do that. So I'd keep the set volume fairly low, maybe 1 to 2 hard sets rather than just adding in too much extra work. And also just a word of caution on volume. If you are doing banded chin-ups and doing 12 reps, but your goal is 1 rep body weight, 12 reps is so far away from 1, the intensities don't really cross over and you're probably gonna struggle to ever get to the point you can do a pull-up. And also if you're doing those negatives, the lowering phase only, if you've been working up to 5 seconds per lowering phase, 7 seconds per lowering phase, 10 seconds per lowering phase, That is so slow. And again, it doesn't really match what you're trying to do for that one all-out effort. So I'd rather these things are a little bit shorter, a little bit less volume, but harder. Now let's talk about accessory work. These are things you can do across your workout that will help support getting stronger in the pull-up. Specificity is key here. Pull-ups are a horizontal pulling action, so the majority of your exercises need to make sure they're training similar to that movement. The obvious accessory could be a lat pull down. These are useful, they train the same pattern of movement, but you're very secure, so they're going to be the sort of exercise that probably is going to be limiting as far as its carryover to the pull-up. And potentially it's just going to be weighing in with more fatigue and not actually helping you progress in step towards the pull-up. Another obvious one is your row variations. Once again, these aren't exactly the same movement patterns, so it's hard to think that this is going to transfer over. Both the lat pull downs and the row would help you build muscle, but like I said at the start, getting stronger is the focus. You're probably not limited by how much muscle you have. I would say relative strength is more important than building muscle. So being really blunt, if someone's got a lot of body weight to lose, then it's probably more important to get some of that weight off. That's going to help relative strength rather than doing tons of row variations. Finally, core work. I do really like some core work for the pull-ups, especially something like a hollow hold. I especially like these if you can do them hanging, but you do need to be careful not to overtax that grip strength. Once again, the word here is carryover. Exercises like a reverse crunch or a sit-up, yes, they will increase core strength, but it's very hard to believe that's going to carry over and actually help you whilst hanging off the bar. So let's try and keep these core exercises a little bit more specific to the actual demands of the exercise you're trying to work towards. This last part is where most people go wrong, and it's the most important thing overall. And the key here is patience. Chin-ups take time, and progression can feel quite slow. And it's very important to celebrate the small wins, because you're not going to be working from a thicker band to a thinner band that quickly, but you might be getting more smoother control, better positioning of the shoulder blades, maybe slightly smoother and slower on those lowering phases, and just generally feeling more confident at the bar. I would suggest, if it's possible, to record some of your sets so you can play it back and look at your technique. And this is also quite a good visual for month-to-month progression. And that's it. Remember, chin-ups take time, but with the right approach, you can get there. Now, thank you for watching. I'm Andy Vincent. Make sure you hit subscribe. Every week I'll be taking a deep dive into exercise tutorials.